Hello, everyone, and welcome back to an ALEC TV live stream. We're coming to you from downtown Atlanta at the Hilton at our 49th annual meeting. And today we have a very special guest with us. But first, I want to introduce our task force director on all things criminal and civil justice reform, Nino Marchese. Thank you, Nino.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. It was great to see some of my hometown people back from Tampa, Florida. Attorney General Moody, she gave a great speech today on human trafficking. What the legislature can really do to help with the issue, how state lawmakers can help with the issue, and then how to organize it down from the executive branch to local level, private sector. I thought it was a great speech. And with me here, I have Representative Moser of Kentucky. She's our Criminal Justice Task Force Public Sector Chair.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. What were your thoughts on Attorney General Moody's speech and some of the insights she shared?
I think it's really interesting to hear from our state leaders, and it really is thought-provoking when we think about what we are doing in the legislature, dealing with something as important as human trafficking. And it caused me to kind of reflect back on some of the legislation that we've passed in my home state of Kentucky and some of the work that our Attorney General is doing as well. And it's really about education and awareness, setting up a task force and even an office of human trafficking and prevention efforts, training some of our law enforcement, and really trying to get a handle on what is really, I think, historically an underreported problem in many of our states. So I thought it was a great discussion. I loved the examples of law enforcement involvement. So I thought it was very, very helpful, as a lot of the talks that we hear here at ALEC are.
Right. Yeah. I thought one of the most interesting things she talked about was how she helped create a task force, more or less, in every single judicial circuit in the state of Florida. I know other states classify them, like you said, in different types of jurisdictions. But basically, all 20 jurisdictions in Florida have some type of task force comprised of people from all realms of the criminal justice system, prosecutors, maybe defense counsel, legislators, policymakers, and other private sector members, to really help identify how to tackle the issue from a statewide perspective, but also at the local level too. Is there anything that you've heard in Kentucky of that being done in that way, similar to that when you talked about Kentucky tackling these issues?
Yes, exactly. And I think that's what I'm talking about when I mentioned the task force that our Attorney General Daniel Cameron has put together. And it really is kind of a collaborative effort with many of the state legislative officials as well as the executive branch, right down to our local law enforcement and working with our Commonwealth attorneys and others. I think it really highlights the importance of really being on the same page with some of our policymakers and really knowing and understanding how to really affect change and make a difference in the lives of the people who are really affected by this.
Right. What I particularly liked presentation was how she broke down tackling the issue into three major steps. The first was just public education, how to spot human trafficking, what it may look like, whether it be truck drivers or community engagement leaders. Secondarily, implementing training law enforcement how to target it and identify it as well. And then the third, and I think the critical component to actually following through with prosecutions, is to provide victim services. It doesn't always need to be a matter of bleeding hearts and taking care of people. Well, of course that's important. We should always be empathetic, but I think she really highlighted how important it is to really follow through with the justice system via taking care of victims, making sure they're in a stable condition. A lot of the times that they're hooked on and addicted to drugs, usually at the hand of the human traffickers that are leading the organization, unfortunately. And so getting those victims stable to be able to cooperate with law enforcement and testify, I just thought it was such a great system to share from head to tail, how they're handling it in Florida.
Yeah.
Representative, if I could just ask a quick question. I wasn't able to hear Attorney General Moody's remarks. So one of the things that I was wondering is how she's going about I understand that she's like sort of a 360 look, like she's looking at every point of contact that these victims or the perpetrators could have. One of them being the hotels And so she's developed some sort of a training system for those frontline workers. Is that something that you have done in Kentucky?
Well, yes, as part of the legislation that we passed, it really raised awareness in some of those areas where, we know that with truck drivers, they might be some of the frontline folks who are going to see individuals who are being exploited. And so how do they identify individuals who may be in this situation? Yes, we have this awareness campaign across our state. And I think that many of these areas are being addressed and really kind of focused on, as well as understanding the population who really is at risk for being exploited.
Well, who is that population?
Well, I think that it is oftentimes illegal immigrants. They have this, kind of offense hanging over their head that is very exploitable. Substance use disorder is a huge problem across our nation. And of course, we're seeing that in Kentucky as well. And as Nino said, oftentimes the perpetrators of human trafficking are targeting individuals with, or they have even propagated some of the substance use that we know keeps people dependent and in that cycle. Children, I think it was really important to note that parents should be really on the lookout for, online activity that would suggest some sort of exploitation of children. And I think that there are a lot of things that we can think about in terms of those populations that are really being targeted. That's really some of what Kentucky is working on, and I know that other states are working on this as well.
And Nino, when you talk about the populations that are being targeted, Nino and I live near each other in suburban Northern Virginia, more of a sort of a high-income part of the nation. But I have heard that our community, Fairfax County, Virginia, has a huge problem with human trafficking. And it's like young girls in upper middle class suburban neighborhoods who get co-opted sometimes by like these immigrant gang groups or even their own family members. How do you deal with the where you think you're in a safe suburban neighborhood, but yet you're really not? You're still vulnerable. Is that an issue that these task forces are looking at? Is communities that may think that they're safe and not recognize that they do face those same dangers?
I think it goes back to what Representative Moser said about how important it is that parents stay active in their kids' lives and being on top of their social media presence. Attorney General Moody said, there's no such thing as being too overprotective or a helicopter parent. I think that's kind of probably what she was speaking to. Immigrants are obviously a target. Unfortunately, a lot of their home and life circumstances in other countries is less preferable than being trafficked in the States. So that's a big, component and a big part of the population. But yeah, there's American families, some American girls, upper middle class, like you're talking about. And I think the main thing is parental involvement, stopping the process before it becomes a criminal justice issue. Getting ahead of the criminal justice system in that way, I think is the biggest preemptive measure that families and Americans can take to stop it from even becoming part of the problem.
Right. Do you foresee this issue as being something that your task force will be very active on in the next legislative session when lawmakers get back into session?
I mean, I don't see why not. It touches into many different areas. Drug policy, drug reform. A lot of these human trafficking organizations are legalizing drugs as a huge component, mechanism of their organizations. That on top of sex crimes, our task force has several model policies on sex crimes and sex abuses. So I think this issue, it's sensitive and it's delicate and extremely heinous, but it covers, and that part of why that is because it's a combination of so many other criminal elements.
Well, it is, and it's hard to define. When you try to define exactly what human trafficking is, it encompasses a whole lot of heinous crimes, and so that becomes part of the discussion. I think it's very valuable to have these discussions. This is a problem that we're seeing just get worse across the U.S. So exactly why that is a great reason a great place to start. Exactly what's driving this and who are the exploited populations.
And I just have one more question before we wrap it up. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, just one more thing I wanted to add. I thought Attorney General Moody ended the segment perfectly. She spoke directly to legislators, and she said that if there's something that you want to do to really help with this issue as a state lawmaker, go down to what she called the line workers, your district prosecutors, your sheriff's offices, police departments, other community organizations helping, victim services, and ask them what it is that you need from us. What needs to be changed in the law to help make your job easier? What barriers are you experiencing?
Right.
And how can we gain your insight to make the actual effective changes in the law that need to be made to tackle the issue? And I think that's perfect advice for legislators to hear in any issue area, really, but especially for something like human trafficking.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's how we tackle every issue, and I think that it's great to continue that work and partnering together.
Well, just one last question, somewhat related to that, is there a role that social media has played in exacerbating this problem? Is there any data that shows that social media is contributing to this?
I haven't seen that, but I think that we should certainly dig down on that data. And really, I think it's an interesting question. Certainly, we see that social media is prolific in everything else, so I'm sure that it has really contributed. And then we also did hear from Attorney General Moody about just the ways, and the law enforcement aspect, the various ways that perpetrators are targeting young children through social media. So,
The prosecutor that we had on stage, Attorney General Moody, I believe her name was Ms. Peters, she said that I think 70 to 80% of human trafficking, how they recruit them, is done through online means, and 60 to 70% of that is through social media. Mm-hmm. So that's what these people are using now. Social media is a huge component of that. It's a large factor of what prosecutors and sheriff's offices are looking at in their evidence gathering and prosecuting these people. So absolutely, social media is playing a huge role in this.
Right. Thank you so much. And my very last question, if I could just ask you, because we want to get all of our guests who come on today to tell us what is the value for these ALEC meetings for you? Like, being a member of ALEC, what do you get out of it? And if you could share with others who may be on the fence or other lawmakers who aren't sure, what is ALEC? What is ALEC, and how do you benefit? How do your constituents benefit?
Well, I benefit just in the networking across the nation. It's so interesting to hear about what's working in other states and maybe what isn't. And to really talk to other legislators, talk to some of our staff across the nation about some of the issues. And it's clearly not just criminal justice. I actually chair Health and Family Services in Kentucky. So I'm very interested in how the negative health effects that we see in our state and across the nation affect everything else that we do. And so I think that ALEC offers a very common sense approach to looking at the impact of either our policies or our lack thereof. So it's very energizing for me to come to these meetings. I love connecting with Nino and our staff, other legislators, and really taking a deep dive on some of the policies that we know are making a difference.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Nino.
Thank you.